Okay. First of all, tonight's class is sponsored by anonymous person who's is the letters of his name is EH. The acronym for his name is EH, and he's doing it. He's sponsoring it because of the kindness of Hashem, that he was very kind to him lately, and therefore he decided to sponsor tonight's class. Okay, tonight is Pesach, and what we usually have three classes on Pesach. One about preparing the house for Pesach, one about products, and one about the actual Seder and all the other things that need to be done. The night of Pesach, the day of Pesach, especially this year is different because Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, so that changes a lot of issues, and as we will get to then. Okay, I just want to give an introduction before we go into getting the house ready for Pesach. It says in Sfarim that before Pesach, people should be extremely careful in anger because everybody's uptight, everybody's busy, everybody's nervous, and people get angry. Now, there's something called Shalom Bayis. Shalom Bayis means peace at home. That's, according to all opinions, biblical. Shalom Bayis is biblical. Anger is Avodah Zarah, idol worshiping. So when it comes to Pesach, as the Rebbe once told to somebody, that dirt is not chametz, and that children don't have to be the Paschal lamb. In other words, we don't have to sacrifice our children when it comes to Pesach. When it comes to Pesach, there are extremes in, I'm going to use the word fanaticism of Pesach. There are people that are lenient. There are people that are strict. There are people that are extremely, extremely strict. And that is based on what the Arizal writes. The Arizal says, whoever is careful with the minutest amount of chametz on Pesach is, so to speak, guaranteed that they're not going to sin. And that's why people go crazy when it comes to Pesach. They will not only do what halacha demands them to do, they'll go way above and beyond what halacha demands. But what's very important to keep in mind, and this is in every aspect of Pesach, both cleaning, products, the things that to say that there's a lot of things that all these things have to be kept in mind. You can't do what's called hiddur mitzvah. You can't do a beautification of a mitzvah above and beyond the letter of the law at the expense of doing what halacha says. In other words, if a person is going to be super fanatic on Pesach, and not halacha, super fanatic on Pesach, and because of that, it's going to cause fights in the home, there's no question it's a ridiculous question. If you ask a shaila, is it what's worth doing a fanaticism or worshiping idols, which anger is like worshiping idols? When it comes to Pesach, there's a number of issues people need to keep in mind. The husband and wife need to be on the same page. If when it comes to Pesach, they don't find themselves on the same page, so what they need to do, and this is so important, they need to speak to a Rav, they need to speak to a mashpia, a mentor, to find out what is the proper thing to do in this case. I'll give you a simple example. There is a custom by many people that when cutlery, something falls on the floor during Pesach, halachically it doesn't matter, especially not today. But there is a custom that people had that if cutlery would fall on the floor during Pesach, they would put it away and they wouldn't use it anymore in Pesach. Okay, until next Pesach. That was a custom some people have. So I know of a case of a Baal Tshuva couple here in the city of LA, and they were told when they became religious that this is what you got to do. And they had little kids in the house, so cutlery kept falling on the floor, and the husband kept putting it away. So he ended up without cutlery. And then the husband wanted the wife to have guests, but she said, but I have no cutlery. So our guy buy plastic. He said, no, you can't use plastic. You have to use only cutlery. But he put away all the cutlery. So what happened? They got into a bloody fight. Now tell me, is that worth the whole thing? It's not worth it. So when it comes to Pesach, people have to know you do what you're able to do. Okay? If fanaticism is going to cause no shalom bias, the children will be completely disillusioned from what Pesach is supposed to be all about, the beautiful Yom Tov it's supposed to be about, then halachically, you're not allowed to do those fanaticism. You have to find out, what does the Torah want me to do? Okay, this is just as a brief introduction to today's thing. As we mentioned at the beginning, dirt is not chametz. Okay? This Pesach cleaning, halachically, has to be done when there's chametz in a place. A room that you bring chametz into needs to be cleaned for Pesach. Rooms that are basically not brought chametz into during the year, halachically, you don't have to go crazy and cleaning the room. Halachically, there's no obligation to wash carpets before Pesach. There is no obligation halachically to wash drapes before Pesach. Yeah, people do it. If they can handle it, they want to do it, and there's no issues with it, fine. But there's many more important issues that need to be dealt with. And I'll give you a simple example. A person who owns a car is much more difficult to get that ready for Pesach than it is a bedroom. Especially if you have cars with young kids who during carpool eat in the car, drink in the car, make a mess in the car, and underneath the seats and in between the seats, and who knows where the kids make a mess, and somehow they have a talent of messing up every possible corner of the car. That is an important place to clean halachically. But a room that you don't bring chametz into during the year, yeah, it's a good idea to clean it, but you don't have to go crazy with it because dirt is not chametz. You have to get rid of the chametz. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the kitchen basically and tell people what you're halachically allowed to do. I'm not saying you should do it. Every person should do, but I'm going to tell you things that are halachically accepted to do rather than getting into fights or a million other things. Okay? So we're going to go from the easier places. The refrigerator and freezer is a place where you kick chametz a whole year. If you're planning to use the refrigerator and freezer for Pesach, it needs to be cleaned. Okay? Because yet nothing was hot there, but it's still cold chametz. And as everybody knows, in the refrigerator, there's cracks, there's crevices in the freezer, in the door where the casket is. There's a lot of crumbs in many places. Crumbs that you can't get to. Sometimes there's holes, that the pieces of chametz fall into over there and you can't reach it. So halachically, all you have to do is pour a little bit of bleach down there to make it inedible. And that's good enough halacha. You don't have to take apart the freezer and start unscrewing it and take it apart. The problem is that's easy. To put it back together is hard. So what you have to do is, if there's a place where you see the chametz and you can't get to it, so you take a little bit of cleanser, a little bit of bleach, you can just pour it down there a little bit, and then halachically it's good. So the refrigerators you have to clean out thoroughly. Many people have a custom that they line the shelves as an additional precaution. They'll line the shelves of the refrigerator and freezer with whatever it is, whatever they want to use, plastic. Now they sell all these shelf liners, whatever you want to use to line the shelves. And that's an additional precaution in case you didn't clean it out 100% well. That will be okay for that. And the same thing with the freezers. Now, countertops, depending what type of material it is. Okay, now I just want to mention one thing. Koshering for Pesach is stricter halachically than it is during the year. Because during the year we know halachically that treif in kosher, meat and milk, become nullified 1 in 60. Okay? Chametz on Pesach, during Pesach, never becomes nullified. 1 drop of chametz falls into a big, massive matzo ball soup, whatever, that all becomes chametzik, never becomes nullified. So therefore, when it comes to kashering on Pesach, there are certain things we're more lenient kashering during the year, but not when it comes to Pesach. So for instance, I'm just telling you materials that are not kasherable. Formica is not kasherable for Pesach. Quartz is extremely questionable if it's kasherable for Pesach. Basically, the only materials that can be kashered for Pesach would be marble, granite, or stainless steel. Those are the only ones. Tiled countertops cannot be kashered for Pesach. Now, if you have one that you can't kasher, so what do? It's a very simple thing. You clean it out well, and then you line it with something that everything you put down on the counter does not touch the actual counter. Now, you can't use aluminum foil because the second you put something down on aluminum foil is going to rip. So you have to put, whether it's vinyl or thick plastic, and then put something over it, whatever you want to come up with is totally irrelevant. The main thing is counters that are not kasherable should be covered with something. Now, obviously, you want to make it a covering that when you put down a boiling hot pot, you're not going to melt it. So you always have to make sure that if you're planning to put down hot things on the countertop, that it's something that you're able actually to put it down without melting it or ruining it or so on and so forth. Now, if it's a kasherable material, let's say you want to kasher your metal or granite or marble, so then it has to be cleaned. It cannot be used for 24 hours for anything hot. And then, halachically, you pour boiling hot water all over the countertop. Many people are stricter when it comes especially to Pesach, that they will heat up a big rock or stone on the fire to make it red hot. And then with tongs, obviously, they will pour the water as they put the stone on the countertop. They will pour the water over it as they move it around on the countertop. If you're afraid the rock will ruin the countertop, then you can pick it up off the countertop, pour the water over it, and move it around so that the water goes over the rock and every place of the counter that you're koshering. I don't want to go into the reasons for all these things because we'll never finish what we need to do. So that's the countertops. So countertops, basically, you either cover, or if you don't want to bother koshering it, you just line it, cover it, and that's good to go. You don't have to do anything else with it. Table.
One question.
What?
What about resealing it?
If you reseal it, that's good. That's a covering.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now, if you want to, let's say, tablecloths and towels, so generally speaking, it's halachically preferred. You have your special tablecloths, special towels for Pesach, you put away from year to year. Halachically, a tablecloth, if it's washed in a hot water cycle, and you check it afterwards to make sure there's no, spills or stains that might have substantial chametz in it, halachically they could be used. And the same thing with towels. Again, many people prefer to have separate tablecloths and separate towels. Tables that you eat on, because you used chametz there a whole year, tables should be cleaned and covered. Now, again, if you have stainless steel or marble tabletops or granite tabletops, yeah, you could pour boiling hot water over it with a rock and it's good. Even then, many people would cover it anyway. But the table, the kitchen table, the dining room table, what needs to be done is you clean it well and then you cover it. Then you could put vinyl and plastic and, anything that would cover it that's going to hold. Some people make a thin board that they just have for Pesach and they put it on top of the table. Whatever works.
Can I ask, please, can you blow torch instead of pouring boiling water? Can you blow torch the counters in the sink instead?
I didn't get to the sink yet. You can definitely blow torch the counters on one condition, that you don't kill it. Because if you kill it, then you're lucky. Then you have to buy a new one for Pesach anyway. But yes, you can blowtorch it if it's. We'll come into that later. How you would need to blowtorch. Let's say if you have fragments like a stainless steel tabletop, or how would you be able to do it or a countertop with that? We'll get there soon. Okay, now the sinks. The sinks, you have to understand, are full of hot chametz during the year. So again, what material? A regular enamel porcelain sink is not kosherable. Okay, the only sinks that are practically able to be koshered, really, more or less, is stainless steel. Now, in any time you kosher something with hot water, it cannot be used for hot 24 hours prior to the time you want to kosher it. That means if you have a stainless steel sink and you want to kosher the sink cannot be used for hot for 24 hours prior to the time you want to kosher it. So it has to be cleaned and not used for 24 hours. I suggest, because there's something called husbands, there's something called housekeepers, there's something called kids. They're the biggest troublemakers in the kitchen, those three. If you want to make sure that nobody's going to use this sink for hot water, number one, you turn off the hot water underneath the sink. You turn off the hot water underneath the sink, that nobody can use hot water from the sink. And then you cover it also with something that people will remember, not to pour down their hot coffee, leftover hot coffee down the sink. If it's an enamel sink, or porcelain sink, or anything which is not stainless, you cannot kosher it for Pesach. Therefore, what you need to do, some people will pour boiling hot water all over it anyway, even though it doesn't really accomplish too much. And then people would they sell now in the stores, in the kosher markets, and hardware stores, sink inserts. Basically, it's like a Rubbermaid tub, but it has lips around the side that covers it. Then you can make them to sizes bigger, smaller, medium, and you put it, and they have holes at the bottom for the water to go down. So what you need to do is, if you want, pour boiling hot water all over the sink, if it's enamel or non-kosherable, and then you get the tubs to put inside the sink. Otherwise, you cannot use the sink on Pesach. Unless if you have just a Rubbermaid tub and you make sure the dishes don't go above and beyond it and don't touch the walls, and you basically need to get an insert. If you have a stainless steel sink, again, you can pour boiling hot water all over the sink, preferably with the hot rock, or some people do something else. They'll heat up an iron and make sure you use an iron that you don't need anymore. They'll take an iron, they'll heat it up until it really gets hot, unplug it. You don't want to kosher yourself. Unplug it, and then you pour boiling hot water over the iron with the handle. It's easier to move, and you move it all around the sink. Now, the faucet of the sink is another issue. A lot of faucets today are made from plastic. Just for a fact. A lot of them are made from plastic. Some of them even look like metal, but it's plastic. Plastic is not kosherable for Pesach. So what you need to do, you need to make sure the sink was not used for 24 hours. If you have a plastic faucet, you pour boiling hot water all over the faucet, but then you need to cover the faucet. Okay? So what you do is, just as practical example is, you use something like cheesecloth, which is movable, and then you put it, keep it on with a rubber band or something to make sure that it stays on, that it doesn't keep falling off. And the water will drain through, by the way, from the faucet with cheesecloth. The water does go through. So that's.
Can I ask you a fast question? Oh, how do you prevent the chametz that's in the drain?
We didn't get to the drain yet.
Okay.
1 second. So that's the way you kosher the faucet. Even if it's stainless, you have to make sure if there's any intricate places, it's a problem. You can't kosher it because you can't clean it. And by many sinks, by the way, at the end of the faucet, as you can unscrew it, like this little strainer in there. That should be either taken out for Pesach or changed for Pesach because that strainer has chametz in it and you can't kosher it. So if your sink has that little strainer at the end, it needs to be removed for Pesach. You either get a new one or just leave it off for Pesach. That's as far as the sinks go. Okay. Now, as far as the drain goes of the sink, the drain usually, now again, another general rule that I alluded to before, if something is not cleanable, it's not kosherable with boiling hot water. Boiling hot water can only kosher something which is 100% clean. If it cannot be like a strainer, a sieve, anything like that cannot be koshered for Pesach because you can't really ascertain. There's not even a drop of dirt or chametz or whatever it is there. Now, the problem with the drain is usually around the drain, there's a piece of metal that goes around the drain. Now, you can't clean between the metal and what's underneath it. So then what needs to be done really, if you have an insert, that covers it all. So that's fine. But if you don't have an insert, you're going to have to cover the drain area. Now, I do want to mention as follows. According to Murphy's Law, sinks always back up only on Pesach. That's Murphy's Law. Sinks seem to know when it's Pesach. Sinks always back up in Pesach. Now, the question is, in the middle of Pesach, my sink backs up. What do I do? What you need to do is, number one, make sure there's nothing in the sink. Take out the tubs from the sink. Okay? Now, usually the water that backs up is not hot. It's not hot enough to make a halachic problem. But you have to take out the tub. You have to make sure with the garbage disposal, whatever it is, that the water goes down. You wash with cold water, wash the sink. And then you wash again with cold water the bottom of the tubs to make sure no residue from what backed up is going to be touching the bottom of the basin. Okay? Now, generally speaking, this is not halacha, but I want to advise, any plumber will tell you, you should really minimize the usage of the garbage disposal. They say you shouldn't really put potato peels down there. It kills it, besides the fact it ruins it, and then it causes things to back up also. The best thing when it comes to Pesach, you don't throw anything down the garbage disposal. You throw it in the garbage. If things fall down, a little bit of food fall down, then you can use the garbage disposal. But even when you use the garbage disposal, you don't want things squirting back up into the sink. So what you need to do is take something to cover when you turn on the disposal, just to cover the drain a little bit that nothing squirts back into the sink. And then you use the garbage disposal on and off, on and off, on and off, keep pouring water down there, but then you don't want the things should back up. As far as microwaves, cannot be kosher for Pesach. Advice is, you buy a microwave, they're not that expensive. You keep it from year to year for Pesach, and that's the best way of doing microwaves. But you cannot kosher a microwave for Pesach. Definitely not the way we hold. Another thing you can't kosher for Pesach is a dishwasher. A dishwasher, you cannot kosher for Pesach. So you either get a Pesach dishwasher, or you use the old-fashioned dishwashers with the two human hands. That is what you can do for Pesach, but you can't kosher dishwasher, you can't cover microwaves. Kids' high chairs, you need to make sure that they're clean. I think that I'm leaving nothing for last. The high chairs, you have to clean out, make sure that there's no dirt all over the place. It would be preferable to cover the shelf, the tray of the high chair, because, maybe normally you don't give hot chametz to a kid, but you don't know, maybe hot chametz spilled on it. It's better if you just cover it with anything from contact paper. Make sure you get it off after Pesach and so on. Okay, let's talk about the ovens. And I'm going to give it again. I'm going to say that you will find people that will not kosher their ovens for Pesach in any way, shape, size, or form. They just won't. Either they'll have a Pesach dika oven or they'll cook everything not in the oven. Halachically, it's possible to kosher an oven for Pesach, especially if it's self-cleaning. But I'm first going to say, okay, let me talk first about self-cleaning. But there's a big issue now with the self-cleanings, by the way. The new modern ovens, the old-fashioned self-cleaning ovens go up to 900 degrees. 900 degrees is the temperature of the older self-cleaning ovens, which according to halacha is making something red hot. Okay? There's a new self-cleaning thing. It's called Aqualift, Steam Clean, Maytag, GE. A lot of these self-cleaning ovens are not self-cleaning halachic ovens. They get up to 250 degrees, not more. That's what they get up to. And with chemicals, whatever they put in these new mechanisms, they clean the oven. But it's physically cleaned, but halachically, it is not koshered. 250 will not kosher any oven. So you have to make sure when you're buying a self-cleaning oven, or if you have a self-cleaning oven, you have to make sure that it's an oven that goes up to 900 degrees. That oven is kosherable for Pesach. Now, how do you kosher it for Pesach? You leave the racks in, the trays in, you leave everything in the oven. Even though they tell you not to, it's only because it becomes discolored if you do it often. You leave everything, all the trays and racks inside the self-cleaning oven. If you have a gas stove top, okay, you take the grates that are on top of the stove top, and you put them inside the self-cleaning oven. Now, if they have rubber pieces at the bottom, the grates many times have rubber pieces at the bottom, you have to take those off or else they'll melt in the self-cleaning oven. But you take off those rubber things and you put them into the self-cleaning oven because it koshers it, what's called libun gomor, complete koshering, which it gets to 900 degrees. The only thing you need to do with the self-cleaning oven is line the inside of the whole inside of the oven door, because the oven door doesn't get the heat of 900 degrees. It just doesn't get that hot. So what you need to do, if you're self-cleaning it, and the best thing is to leave it on for 3 hours, self-cleaning. And first, it says in halacha, you really should clean it first yourself, manually. Make sure there's not too much chametz around. And then you self-clean it for 3 hours. It gets up to 900 degrees. It's going to kosher everything except the door. So what you need to do is you have to line the inside of the door with heavy-duty aluminum foil, maybe a few layers. And the practical way of doing it is when you line the inside of the door, extend the aluminum foil and wrap it around the outside of the door and tape it down, that when you open and close the door, the aluminum foil doesn't fall off. Because if you don't do that, you just put on aluminum foil, you open the door, close the door, it's going to fall off very easily. So you want to do it properly, that it should hold. This is not halacha, it's advice. Just wrap it in a way that it goes around the top, the outside. Obviously, after you, somebody asked me today about putting it before you self-clean. You self-clean, you're going to melt the aluminum foil. After you self-clean it and everything's clean and koshered, before you use the oven, you line the inside of the door, okay, with aluminum foil, and you put it outside that it also holds well.
Rabbi Shusterman?
Yes.
Got a question about the Aqua Clean oven. That was the mistake I didn't know about prior to buying it. I I know at the time Rabbi Reichik didn't know the answer. This was a couple of years ago, and he said call the CRC. So I did a lot of research with the CRC a couple of years ago, and they told me to crank it up to 550 and let it run for 3 hours, and that should be fine because I think the highest those go is like 550, 600. So maybe things have changed since then.
Nothing changed, and I will explain to you what they told you, and that has nothing to do with what we're talking now, and I'll explain why in a second. If you don't have a self-cleaning oven, okay, you have a regular oven that's not self-cleaning. So over there's a lot of issues involved. Number one, the oven must be spotlessly cleaned. Because if you have a gas oven, okay, or even, and you take, the fire comes from underneath and there's a tray, a whole thing that blocks the fire. If you take out that tray, you'll see how much dirt there is at the bottom of that. That all has to be cleaned out. That's all chametz. It has to be spotlessly cleaned, the entire oven. And the only way you do it is by taking a flashlight or your cell phone light, and you check all over the place, make sure it's 100% clean. Then, there are opinions in halacha. There are opinions in halacha that say that if you turn a regular oven, including these types of self-cleaning ovens that are not self-cleaning halachically, if you turn it on to broil, which is 550, okay, and you leave the racks in, and you turn it on to 550, and you leave it in there for 2 hours, 3 hours, some people say even over an hour is enough, but whatever. There are opinions that say it's good. Many opinions say it's not good. Okay? So what I'm telling you is like this. If you don't have a self-cleaning oven, what I would suggest is as follows. If you could have a friend or relative that has a self-cleaning oven that can take the racks from your oven and put it into the self-cleaning oven of theirs and kasha the racks at least that way, that would be great. If not, they also, by the way, now oven inserts. I haven't seen them. I've seen them, but not in LA. They have these oven inserts. It's actually a box, a metal box that fits into the oven, and it's like you have a new oven. So then that's great. It's because it's like a brand new oven. But if not, I would suggest like this. If you don't have a self-cleaning oven, and you're going to do it at 550, and rack, what I would strongly suggest is as follows. Line the racks with aluminum foil. You can make holes in it for the air to circulate. Okay? And make sure when you put food into the oven that you make sure the trays don't touch the walls of the oven. Try to be careful that it shouldn't touch the back or the walls of the oven because that wasn't kosher the way it really should be kosher. Now, again, there are opinions that say it's good. I'm not saying it's not good. But people that are machmir when it comes to Pesach, there are many people would be machmir that they would either blowtorch the racks or put it into somebody else's self-cleaning oven, or at least line the racks and try to make sure that the pans, that when you put them into the oven, don't touch the sides of the oven or the top of the oven or things like that. Now, what's with the stovetop? The stovetop is like this. If it's stainless steel, again, you can kosher it. And I'll explain how to kosher it. If it's not stainless steel, then you cannot kosher the stove top. I'm not talking about the grates and the burners. I'm talking about the stove top, the area in between the burners and the grates and everything else. What you need to do then is line the hole with heavy-duty aluminum foil to line the whole top of the stove top. After you clean it, obviously, it has to be spotlessly cleaned. It's a lot of work, by the way, cleaning it. Then what you need to do is what the burners, okay, the grates. Now, if you have an electric stovetop, not this glass stovetop, we're talking about the old-fashioned with the rings, the coils. So then when you turn on the electric stovetop and it's coils and they turn red hot, leave it on for 5 minutes after it gets red hot, that koshers it. The rest of the stovetop, you'll have to line unless if it's metal. Now, how would you kosher it if it's metal? So you can do something very simple. Take a blech, piece of material, a metal, okay? Put it on the whole, if you have stainless steel, put it over the whole stovetop, turn on the fires, and leave it there for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to become red hot. The stovetop does not have to become red hot. The grates, according to the Alter Rebbe, has to be made red hot. Other opinions say it's enough that it gets very hot. If you touch it, you'd burn yourself. But the Alter Rebbe holds it has to be red hot. And therefore, the best thing would be to put it into a self-cleaning oven. Or, burn it out somehow. But if you do it, by the way, if you put a blech, you have a blech that's clean, and you put it over the fires, and you turn on the fires, and you close the lights in the kitchen, after 15, 20 minutes, you'll see that the grates glow in the dark. And that's called red hot, and that would be good.
Rabbi Shusterman, so what about if your grates are not stainless steel? Or the regular, what I don't know what kind of, it's like ceramic or whatever.
Those are not kosher. Those are not kosherable. If possible, people should get different grates, because you can buy the grates from the factory and you keep them for Pesach. Or what you'd need to do after you clean them out and burn them out, you would have to line the entire grate with heavy-duty aluminum foil. But you can smash it on that it fits into the shape of the grate. But that has to be covered. You can't do it without it being covered.
Do you just have to wash the grates really, really good, or do you need to burn them out before you cover them?
I would
with
first
foil?
burn them out on the fire, and then afterwards you have to cover them anyway.
It's like 10 minutes.
10 minutes would be enough to burn up because you're covering them anyway. So that's
Okay.
not a problem.
Thanks.
Now, if you have a glass stovetop, which is very common today, those are extremely problematic when it comes to Pesach. I'll tell you the truth, it's problematic a whole year to kosher. Okay? From people, if they're buying stoves, should not buy glass stovetops unless if you have a milchika side and a fleishika side and you never have problems in the kitchen. And even then for Pesach. Okay, the problem is the top is glass, which is questionable if it's kosherable for Pesach. Okay, technically, you would have to pour boiling hot water over the entire stovetop. And even that is only passably good for the Evid. The problem with that is the manufacturers tell you, and it happens, that many times if you pour boiling hot water over the top of a glass stove top, you will crack it. And then you'll have to buy a new one anyway. Okay, so what you need to do, if you have no choice, let me tell you what needs to be done. And this is, I'm telling you right now, this is possibly, it's not great. You have to clean it out very, very well. And then you have to turn on the fires, leave it on for half an hour at hot and high. Possibly that only koshers the place where the fire is, where the fire actually is. The problem is when you put a pot on those stovetops, the pot extends beyond the actual fire area where the fire comes out of. The pot is bigger than that. So, and that's a problem because that surface can't be koshered. So what you're going to need to do is take aluminum foil and put it around the burner, so to speak, that the pot will never touch anything of the stovetop besides the area that you burnt out with the burners, with the fire. And that's the only thing you could do. But again, it's not a great thing to do. Okay, so dishwashers, microwaves are not kosherable. Another thing I want to mention is, the washing quart that you wash your hands with the whole year. It's not really halachically chametz, but the custom is to get a different one for Pesach because it was around hot chametz the entire year, and it's best that to get a new one for Pesach. Another thing I want to mention, when it comes to women's rings, if women make challah wearing their rings, or they cook with rings on while they're cooking, most probably the rings became chametz because hot chametz goes onto your ring, and the ring is metal, so it's chametz. So I'm not saying you have to kasher the rings, especially you're not going to kasher a diamond ring. You might ruin the setting and whatever. What I'm going to suggest is as follows. If you want to wear rings Pesach, it's not a problem. Clean them out well. Do not wear the rings when you're cooking on Pesach. You could wear them during eating. You could wear them a whole day. But when you're cooking on Pesach, because the rings were came in touch with chametz, and you can't kasher them really, or you don't want to kasher them, so just don't wear the rings while you're cooking for Pesach.
Watches also.
Watches, no. Well, if you want to, you can. It depends how much chametz your watch got. Because steam come onto the watch. Again, truthfully, anything that you wear on your hand during the cooking during the year, you should not wear while you're cooking on Pesach. The rest of the time you can wear it, just not while you're cooking and dealing with very hot foods. I want to remind everybody another point, which I always mention every year, and it's important to keep in mind. After you finish your last vacuuming of the house for Pesach, if you vacuum, your vacuum cleaner bag, or if you don't have a bag, that's the machine itself, is full of chametz. It's mamish full of chametz. And if it's full of chametz, you can't have it around during Pesach. If you plan to use your vacuum cleaner during Pesach, you want to sell it with the chametz, you can put it away with the chametz and not use your vacuum cleaner during Pesach. Excuse me. If you want to use your vacuum cleaner during Pesach, the last vacuuming of chametz before Erev Pesach, you need to throw out the bag, change the bag, and make sure the machine is clean. If you don't have a bag that the dirt goes straight into the machine, you really have to take that part which comes apart anyway, and wash it out. You don't have to kasher it, but you have to wash it out and make sure there's no chametz left in the vacuum cleaner to make sure it's cleaned out properly. Now, when it comes to brooms, it's a good point. Brooms, ideally, you should have separate brooms for Pesach because brooms, again, are full of chametz. Yeah, it's very hard to clean a broom. And you have a Pesach broom. You can, anyway, some people change brooms every year anyway. So if you want to change brooms every year, do it during Pesach. Or put away your chametz broom and have a Pesach broom, use only for Pesach. So that also needs to be done. By the way, your cabinets that you're planning to use for Pesach, let's say you have a cabinet that had chametz dishes during the year, and now you're going to take dishes away and put in your Pesach dishes. Halachically, all you have to do is clean the shelf. Some people like to reline it, but halachically, there's no hot chametz there. It's just clean plates. So maybe something is there. All you have to do is clean it out. Even if you have a pantry that you're planning to use for Pesach and you're taking out your chametz sticker cans or whatever it may be, and you're going to restock it with Pesach sticker things, halachically, all you have to do is clean it out. Some people like to reline it. You can reline it, but you don't have to. You just clean it out. Halachically, you don't have to, but it's preferable to move out your refrigerator, because if you move out your refrigerator, you will see there's a lot of dirt and possibly chametz underneath there. So if you're able to move it out, it's better to move it out. You don't have to halachically because it's buried under 3 tvach 9 inches of wall, but it's preferred that you should, move it away and then clean underneath and then move it back. Now, if somebody wants to kasher utensils for Pesach, okay, it's very complicated, okay, and I suggest I don't know what's going to be this year. Last year, the world closed down for COVID, so everything was different. But if there are shuls in your area that do have a kashering service before Pesach, the kasher utensils that you want to kasher, please bring it to them because they have the proper utensils, they know what they're doing, hopefully, and it's just much easier. Okay, but if you do want to kasher things yourself, if you want to kasher a becher, kiddush cup, you want to kasher some cutlery, whatever you want to kasher. Number one, it has to be completely metal. If there's a plastic handle, wooden handle for Pesach, you cannot kasher it. So it has to be, and it cannot be a very intricate design. If there's an intricate design on it, halachically, you cannot clean it out 100%, and therefore, you shouldn't kasher it for Pesach. But if you have a regular becher, you could kasher it for Pesach. I'm sorry, I want to go back 1 second. Your Shabbos candlesticks that you use on the table a whole year for Shabbos, obviously, hopefully didn't come in contact with hot chametz, even though you might have washed it during the year with hot water in a chametz stick sink. Okay, so therefore the suggestion is you clean the candle holders very well. You put something underneath the tray, that the tray holding up the candle does not sit directly on the table. You just put something on the aluminum foil or a nice tray, something underneath it. Then you put the tray with the candle holders. You don't have to line the candle holders. You don't have to do anything to the candle holders. You just make sure they're clean, and preferably don't put them directly onto the table. Preferably just put them on top of a tray, which is on top of something else on top of the table. Okay, coming back to koshering utensils. Anything that you're koshering.
Can I ask a question?
What?
The candlesticks, can I just keep it on a different table, like on a different cabinet? Like I have a.
Yes, you could just clean off the candlesticks.
Right, but I don't have to put it on the Pesach table.
No, you don't have to.
Okay, thank you.
Even though I do want to say that when the Rebbe visited Mechon Chana, Pesach night, the Rebbe would visit the yeshiva, and then he went to Hadar Torah, and he went a few years to Mechon Chana. When the Rebbe went there Pesach night, he saw the candles were not on the table, and the Rebbe said to the girls, at least one candle preferably should be on the table. But again, halachically, and that's what the Rebbe told him. Halachically, though, if the candles are near the table that you could benefit from the light, it's good enough. Especially Pesach, some people would rather put it off the table because of Pesach. Okay? Now, anything you want to kasher, that's stainless steel, because that's practically the only material you can kasher, or silver, any metal, basically. It has to be spotlessly cleaned and not used for 24 hours prior to the time of kashering. Okay? Then, how do you kasher it? The easiest thing would be, if your stove is Pesach already, like you have Pesach the bread and Pesach the kapat, this is the easiest way. Take a Pesach the kapat that wasn't used for 24 hours. Fill it up with water 3/4 of the way. Bring it to a bubbling boil. And then put in one thing at a time and make sure the water is still bubbling. Leave it in there for about 10 seconds. Take it out with tongs or whatever and rinse it under cold water, and then do the next and the next or whatever you want to do. If somebody wants to kasher with a chametz pot, they first have to kasher the pot that they want to use for kashering, and then they can kasher the Pesach things. Okay, but again, things of plastic are not kasherable. Things of glass, Sephardim and Ashkenazim have a different custom, but Ashkenazim don't kasher glass for Pesach. Some Sephardim do, some Sephardim don't. Some people are more lenient year-round, but in Ashkenazic circles for Pesach, we don't kasher glass. So anything which is glass is not kasherable for Pesach in our circles. Okay, I'm going to first go to the chat and see what questions were asked. Did I understand correctly? One can clean and line a marble countertop without koshering first. The answer is, if it is properly covered, that you put something down on it, it's not going to rip it, you do not have to kosher it, halachically. Next question, how do you kosher an electric oven? Again, if it's an electric oven that's self-clean, you self-clean it and line the inside of the door. If it's not a self-cleaning oven and you want to rely on the more lenient opinion of turning on the oven to 550 to broil, so you do that with the electric oven. There's no difference between an electric oven and a gas oven as far as koshering it. Okay, I just thought what about a stainless steel insert in the sink? If you want to use a stainless steel insert, that's fine. It's just as good as anything else. Do you need to kosher the faucet? We mentioned before that you need to kosher the faucet because the faucet is definitely trade. Can you blowtorch the counters and sink instead of boiling water? Yes, but again, let me just tell you something like this. I know from experience of what people told me, when you blowtorch a sink, it does not have to become red hot. Okay, first of all, you'll melt the sink. It has to become very hot, if it's clean, that if you touch it, you burn yourself right away. Okay? The problem is, I know of cases, a lot of cases, that people, it's much easier, of course, to blowtorch the sink. When they blowtorch the sink, they actually made leaks in the sink because it's a very thin coating of metal. And even a blowtorch on it for a few seconds in one given place will make little holes, and you'll end up with a leaky sink for the duration of Pesach. So I'm saying, halachically, yes, you could do it. You can blowtorch the counters. You can do all that. But I'm just saying, in a practical way, unless if you know what you're doing with the blowtorch, and the problem is like this: if you're afraid you're going to make a hole, you're not going to make it hot enough. So it's like a catch-22 situation. But if you know what you're doing, and you could do it that way without any problem. Okay, before we go further, is there any questions about what we discussed, or any other questions about the kitchen?
Well, if you don't use hot water in your sink, but sometimes when you pour boiling water into the sink with your cooking, so you still, even though the sink technically cannot be koshered and the faucet's made of plastic or some plastic in it, and it really can't be koshered, you still have to.
Then you would have to line the inside of the sink again the same way, because hot chametz did get in there.
But
by the way, one second, while we're on that, your kettles cannot be used on Pesach. You need Pesach kettles. If you have an urn, you can't use the same urn you use during the year for Pesach. Because this rubbish around hot chametz a whole year. Whatever you can get, b'chlal, people, when you're making Pesach one year after another, and you start acquiring things slowly but surely, and then you have a whole Pesach kitchen by the time you're done. You have everything that you have: a blender and a KitchenAid and a Cuisinart. Every year you buy a little bit more. You buy a microwave, and every year you buy a little bit more, and then you end up having everything that you need for Pesach. And then you don't need to kasher things. And what does the yellow hand mean?
It means I want to ask a question, please.
Oh, I never heard that before. Okay, yeah, what's the question?
I heard that you should be careful that we have to be careful that the trays don't touch the walls because the wall doesn't get koshered. But what if I koshered it on self-clean that's 900? Do I still have to be careful that the tray doesn't touch the wall?
No, you don't. I mentioned clearly, if it's not koshering self-cleaning, then you should make sure it doesn't touch the walls. If you're koshering self-cleaning, there's no problem with it touching the wall.
Okay, and one more question. The stovetop you said is metal. You don't need to kosher that because it could break. You just cover it with many layers of heavy duty foil.
Was stovetop?
The metal stovetop where the 4 burners are, the actual metal tray, the
Some
whole.
people do, some people don't blow. But if you cover it again, if it's clean and covered with a few layers of aluminum that doesn't rip, is considered good enough. Yes.
Should I put boiling water on it or it'll break the stove?
Well, it depends. If you pour it right over the area where the burners are, it might ruin the stove. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Rabbi, how about the backsplash of the oven? In other words, where you press where to turn it on. Do I have to cover that?
It should be cleaned and covered. By the way, if you have an exhaust on top of your stove,
yes,
a lot of times the hood that's full of chametz. The steam comes up with chametz. What you really need to do is clean it to the best of one's ability and cover it, and not use the exhaust during Pesach, because that's really difficult to clean. It's full of chametz and it's all over the place. Okay, what did I said?
Yeah.
What was your question? 1 second.
Regarding the wedding ring.
1 second, somebody. Are you with the yellow hand? Diana?
I have a question. I have a glass shelf in my refrigerator. What do I have to do with it? We cleaned it as best as we could.
If you preferably would be just to cover it with a piece of any plastic or
What about a paper
shelf liners.
Fridge liner.
Yeah, shelf liners of fridge. That's it.
Well, then it doesn't keep that shelf cold, so that's why we
it does.
use
It
a
does.
paper bag.
No,
The special fridge liners.
It does. There's
Okay.
they sell now in the stores refrigerator shelf liners.
Yes.
You can get them. Yes.
Regarding the wedding ring, if I'm cooking with gloves, can I leave my wedding rings on? Because I always cook with gloves on.
Yes. Okay, Ms. Devorah
Thank you.
Hayman.
What did you say about the drain of the sink? How do we cover that? If we have a stainless steel sink, what do we have to do with the drain around?
You have to cover it with either aluminum foil or something, because that drain you cannot kosher.
No, Rabbi, I have a cast iron sink that's
I'm saying
coated.
if you put an insert in there, then you cover the problem.
But you still want us to put boiling water in when you
Yes.
can? You still should, right?
Okay. I'm going just by yellow hands. I see. Ms. Strasberg.
Rabbi Shusterman, what if you have a kind of a sink with they have handles now that they pull out and they have you can spritz the whole thing. They pull out of the thing, so they kind of become handheld. What do you do?
Pesach, pull it out, clean it out, pour boiling hot water over it, and preferably don't use it during Pesach. I mean, the pull-out part.
Right.
Because it's common stick and you can't really kosher it. So that would be the preferred thing. Clean it, pour boiling hot water over it, but don't use it during Pesach.
Rabbi, can we use Instahot? The tap?
No, when you use a whole year, the instant hot water cannot be used Pesach. You have to cover it.
Rabbi, so to clarify, the exhaust on the oven, I can't. It always turns on when I use it. It's not a feature.
Automatically?
Yeah, when I cook, it always blows up.
It's right up. It's like on the ceiling.
No, it's right at like the same
level.
level.
That one, that's not as bad as the one on top. So clean it out well, and that's it. Yes, Ms. Hayman, 1 second. Ms. Hayman?
Mine goes on automatically, so exhaust.
Ms. Hayman, do you want to ask a question?
Nope, I'm good. I asked. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, the sister wants to ask. Sorry, I just got another question. What's the latest opinion of koshering the stove? Is there damage to the new stoves now if you kosher them with a blowtorch? Or, I mean, what's the opinion on that?
Let me just tell you something. If you have a non-self-cleaning oven and you want to kosher it, stove top or the oven? Oven or stove top?
Oven. Sorry, there was noise. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Oven or stove top?
Oven.
Okay. Let me just explain to you what it says in the books. If you want to kosher it properly, you have to put a blowtorch in every section for 7 minutes. Now, do you know what you're going to do to your oven? You're going to warp it. So therefore, if you need to use a non-self-cleaning oven for Pesach, what you need to do is preferably cover the racks, turn on the oven to the highest, but try to make sure that things don't touch the walls. That's it. But you're not going to be able to do anything more than that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so that's for tonight. Mitzvah Shem. Monday night, we have our regular Parsha class, 8 o'clock on the same Zoom. Next Wednesday, hopefully, we'll have the books out, so we'll be able to do products. And then the third week will be about what to do this year special and the Seder, what to do by the Seder, especially this year. There's a lot of Didim because it's Shabbos going into Yom Tov. So everybody should have a great night and a great week.
Amen.
And by the way,
Thank
I have to correct myself. I mentioned Monday night, we changed the clock this Saturday night. It's not true. The calendar, no, I looked at a calendar that said you changed the clock. But you changed the clock, not this Saturday night, next Saturday night, the 13th at night. So I beg forgiveness. It was a mistake that I followed just a calendar, which, whatever. It's a lesson, you don't follow calendars. But they changed the clock about 1 hour ahead next, not this Saturday night, the following Saturday night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Again, this class was sponsored by a person whose initials are EH, and he's doing it to thank Hashem for the kindness he did to him recently, and he should have an abundance of brachas. And
Amen.
Amen.
Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Rabbi.
much,
Thank you so
Rabbi.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.